Welcome to Searching for Answers, the program where we dig into the text of the Bible in order to get its messages when it was originally written and in our lives today. We are in the Epistle to the Hebrews. Get your Bibles, New Testament, between Philemon and James. Find that important letter, the Epistle to the Hebrews, and go to the last part of it because we're coming right down to the end now as we wind up this fascinating and richly layered text, isn't it? A lot going on. Dr. Bernard Taylor, Old Testament scholar, Dr. William Johnson, New Testament scholar, Beverly Maravilla, a pastor of family life, La Sierra University. My name is John Jones. I'm in the School of Religion at La Sierra, and here we go. Chapter 13, last chapter. We've already dipped into the first half dozen verses, so this is a chance to get right in with verse 7. We have been reminded here, let mutual love continue. And we've been given some examples of what that means. Now, we'll continue to think about that in verses 7 and following. Bill, help us figure this out, if you will. Read us a little and get us into it.
Okay. I think the next paragraph logically is 7 through 9. And it reads like this. I have the New King James. Remember those who rule over you, who have spoken the word of God to you, whose faith follow, considering the outcome of their conduct. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Do not be carried about with various and strange doctrines. For it is good that the heart be established by grace, not with foods which have not profited those who have been occupied with them.
3 rather loaded verses. It helps to know something of what's going on here in order to make sense out of this, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do you understand this, Bill?
Well, you know, there's several ideas that could come together here.
Yeah.
But when he mentions in verse 7 to remember your leaders, listen to your leaders, and he'll come back to that in 17. Obey those who lead you. I link that perhaps with verse 9. Don't be carried about with various and strange doctrines. So there are some wild ideas in the air. Okay. Better listen to those who are leading you. Presumably, he means the elders and the deacons, ministers. Listen to them. Be careful. Be on guard. So that's one thing that's going on. By the way, we don't know what these strange doctrines were. We do know that as the first century went on, more and more heretical ideas arose. Some of them became a major threat to the new church, the infant church. Some of them had ascetic tendencies because they viewed the body or the flesh as material and therefore inferior to the spirit. Those ideas became stronger and stronger in the century. And so already it's happening. We don't know just when Hebrews was written. I tend to think earlier rather than later, not late in the first century. But already these ideas are stirring. We find similar ideas in the Colossian letter from Paul.
Yes, and that would be Paul's lifetime. We're back in the 50s, 60s.
So very early. But then eventually, by the end of the century, they became major. So that's part of what's going on.
Is it possible in that connection, Bill, that the warning up in verse 4, that marriage is a good thing, the reminder, I should say, if you honor it and properly, connected with this about ideas about different kinds of perhaps rather odd food regulations. We have Paul in 1 Corinthians quoting some people in that church saying, well, the stomach is for food and the food is for the stomach. In the same paragraph, where there's sexual immorality, and
Yeah.
the implication is that our bodies are made for sex, and sex is and so is it possible that if we reduce these things to mere physicality, it may be that we've got a parallel here somehow. Maybe some people who are abjuring or turning their back upon their natural sexual life, and who are saying, well, we can't eat this and we can't eat that and we can't
Yeah.
eat the other. It's rather odd, but offbeat ideas about purity. Finally,
Right.
you know?
But really not so odd if you presuppose that the body,
Yeah.
the material,
Yeah.
is basically of no value spiritually. Yeah. Now you find in the pastoral epistles, that is the letters to Timothy and Titus, a very strong statement there about people who forbid to marry,
Yeah.
and who also say abstain from foods. Okay.
Yeah.
Ascetic practices.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very interesting. These ideas crop up in a number of
Yeah, it's a clear subcurrent of some
Oh, yeah,
kind going on there.
very
isn't
much
there?
so.
Yeah. Bill, why at this point, if you were writing this letter, and I would say to our viewers, this is the kind of question that's often good to ask yourself. In the middle of some paragraph or from one paragraph to the next, in anything you're reading in the Bible, ask yourself, if I were writing this, why would I take this turn at this moment? Would I move from thought A to thought B? I'm going to ask you in verse 8, Bill, why insert this thing about the continuity, the sameness of Jesus yesterday, today, and forever, right in the middle of verses 7, 8, and 9?
No, that to me is the great verse of the paragraph. You know, there was a man by the name of Floyd Filson, a scholar, wrote a book
right.
just on this verse.
Yes.
He said this verse sums up the whole of the book of Hebrews. We can go into it, but if you like. But in terms of your question here, remember he's talked about, well, in verse 9, various and strange doctrines, new ideas coming up. You see, a parallel idea to that comes up in the letters of John, which are late letters.
Yes.
First John especially.
Yes. Yes.
Where John has to say, what you heard from the beginning, hold to it. Don't be carried away by these new ideas that are out there. You already have it. Don't listen to these guys who want to say, no, you've got to go beyond what you've had before. So Jesus is the same. Okay. Here's the one who has laid the foundation, and that foundation is not going to change. So I think maybe that's why he throws in that interesting verse. Actually, there's no verb, I think, in the original.
Yeah, that's right. It's
Jesus
just Jesus
Christ,
Christ.
the same.
Yes. Right.
Today,
Yeah.
yesterday, and forever.
Yeah.
Now, why does he say that? He's the same today. Now, yesterday he died for us, okay? That was his saving work on the cross. Today, he is our great high priest in the heavenly sanctuary. Forever, he's coming back again. Tomorrow, if you like, okay? He's coming. He's the same Jesus, unchanging. No new foundation, only Jesus.
So the word today appears in chapter 4, doesn't it?
Yes.
Repeatedly.
Yeah.
But there, well, it's still a kind of continuity, isn't it? That today, our time today heightens the call for the eschatology, the end, right? But nonetheless, it reaches back to affirm that the quest for fulfillment, that the pilgrimage toward deliverance is the same process that today in Christ is there. So maybe this today and that today back in chapter 4 do have a kind of a handshake going on between them somehow.
Yeah, you know, I hadn't thought of it, but I think maybe you're onto something there. The one in chapter 4, I thought of it as God's eternal now, today.
Yeah.
Okay. The ever-present now, the call of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Very strong there. Not
But
as
how
strong
to
here.
act, it also says, while it is still called today.
Yeah.
Well, it's still called today. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And the unifying factor there is that time of Joshua today, time of
Yeah.
David today.
Yeah.
And so this is a today, and there is still a today.
The letter starts out, it seemeth me, with a contrast between once long ago in the olden times, but now today.
Yeah.
And so you've got that kind of shift. But here, this today doesn't emphasize the shift. It emphasizes the continuity somehow, right?
I think in chapter 4, it's especially affected and directed by the Old Testament citation. Today, if you hear his voice.
Yeah, Psalm.
So
Psalm
so he
95.
plays on that word and different parts of that
I see.
Old Testament citation.
Yeah.
Now, we've spoken about this often as a sermon, and I'm not going to change anything about that, but we come to verse 7,
Yeah.
and every sermon is part of a worship service
Yeah.
which has an offering. And this begins like the offering call. Remember your leader. And the giving season is coming, and I'm aware of the medium here. We are on television, and this is wrapping up, you know, and but notice what it says. Remember your leaders, those who spoke the word of God to you. Consider the outcome of their way of life, and imitate not their life, but their faith. And so this is nothing like what so often, remember your leaders. This is not a giving, but this is holding the leaders to a standard that the new members can follow and not be led astray. Which
Good.
is also tied into this with Jesus and his constancy and not being carried away by strange teachers.
Yeah. Beverly, what grabs you here?
I'm thinking on this, getting carried away with strange teachings and, thinking about all these regulations. And I think it's a reminder, even so, just as this, Jewish culture is very much task-based, regulations-based. I mean, you have a very specific way of life. Our Adventist culture is very much a specific way of life. And I think it's a reminder, the way that I was hearing it's a reminder that you do have a way of life, but that your faith isn't in a way of life. Your faith is in the man of Jesus. And that is the constant. Let that be the driving force in what propels you to be a believer and how you extend that belief, how you open, that faith to others. So I think we not get lost in all of these specific ways of life, even though we just came through chapters of, hey, here are really specific ways of doing life, very tangible ways of doing life. And yet faith is something completely other than just the way that you walk your walk, but not absent of walk your walk, right?
It's the wellspring out of which to walk. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. Well said. Brother Bernard, we have an altar.
We do.
Now the language shifts. And this picture from 10 to 16 is the final powerful picture of this whole sermon, isn't it?
Yes.
Paint it for us, if you will.
All right.
10 down through, let's say through 16.
Chapter 13, reading from verse 10.
What's your version?
The New Revised Standard. We have an altar from which those who officiate in the tent or tabernacle have no right to eat. For the bodies of those animals whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest as a sacrifice for sin are burned outside the camp. Therefore, Jesus also suffered outside the city gate in order to sanctify the people by his own blood. Let us then go to him outside the camp and bear the abuse he endured. For here we have no lasting city, but we are looking for the city that is to come. Through him, then, let us continually offer a sacrifice of praise to God, that is, the fruit of lips that confess his name. Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God.
Wow. Wow. Pregnant stuff, isn't it?
Wow.
Bernard, start us off, and Bill, you pick up the ball and run with it then. Bernard, what jumps out at you?
Well, again, we go back to the type, the model of the Old Testament for one last time. And there was an altar there, the altar of, not of burnt offering. These are sacrifices that were taken outside the camp and were burned. And he sees in this a type of Jesus who also suffered outside the city of Jerusalem, because the crucifixion could not be done within the city without defiling it, and so it was taken outside, which leads us to us going outside the camp and bearing the abuse that Jesus endured. Centered in Jesus, but there is, even in this, a lesson for us. For here we have no lasting city, but we're looking for the city that is to come.
Yeah. So the word city functions here as a center that we do not belong to. It's a
Echoes of chapter 11.
yeah, that's
They
right.
looked for a city with foundation.
That's right, a different city, yeah. Okay. Now this, again, once again, takes up again the language that is problematic to us today in many ways. We just are not accustomed to thinking in these terms. And Bernard, you filled in the background nicely here for us. Now, what shall we make of this?
Well, I think it's one of the great paragraphs in all of the Bible.
Yeah.
Much neglected,
Yeah.
because the book of Hebrews is neglected. By the time people come to 13, they just pass over this. So many things, I'll just touch a few of them. Number one, we have an altar from which those who serve the tabernacle have no right to eat. Here you have, I think, the words of a despised minority, who are looked down upon, by those presumably Jews who go to the temple, We have an altar that you don't have, It's sort of the defiance of the minority here. Very revealing.
Yeah.
Now,
It's a despised altar.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
But the language itself is not theological language. I think it's a homiletical application of the sanctuary service. If you go back to Numbers, Leviticus chapter 6, you find that the sin offering was handled in one of two ways. Either the blood was poured out in front of the tabernacle, or else the flesh of the sin offering, part of it, was eaten by the priests inside the tabernacle. Now, if the blood was eaten inside the tabernacle, the carcass was taken and burned in an unclean place. Now, outside the camp is an expression, it's almost like a fixed term. If you go back to Numbers and Leviticus, you see this expression, outside the camp, outside the camp. Outside the camp is the place where unclean people are banished to. It's a place where lepers roam. Right. It's a place where people are executed. It's the unclean place. Yeah. And here's the startling affirmation. Jesus died outside the camp. He died in an unclean place.
To sanctify, that is purify and make pure, verse 12, by his own. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, but think about it. Jesus did not die within the holy city.
Yeah.
He did not die on holy ground, if you like. He died outside.
Yeah.
He died in a profane place, a secular place,
Contaminating place.
contaminating place. But his cross was there, and because he went there, that now is our place also. To me, it speaks so powerfully that as a follower of Jesus, no place is now an unclean place. Okay? I must not think that I am too holy, too righteous, too sanctified, whatever, to go there or to do this, because my Jesus died outside the camp, the unclean place. It is a ringing call for Christians to be engaged in the marketplace, engaged in the secular city. Powerful when you think it through.
Salt of the earth idea kind of thing, in a way.
Yeah, but
Even more.
stronger, the language is stronger than that.
But for the Jewish readers,
Yeah.
it's not within Jerusalem.
Yeah.
No.
It's outside the city for the Jewish Christians.
Yeah.
This is the final message for them. You have to go out. You have to, it's outside, it's beyond. And it sanctifies the unholy.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a strategic use of that word sanctify in verse 12 that stands this whole morphology on its head, right? I mean, the whole structure is inverted. The sanctifying takes place precisely in an unholy place.
John, over the course of the centuries, Christian centuries, there have been many ways, of course, of seeking to follow Jesus. One stream, and we see it in Adventism, has been that of isolation.
Yeah.
You know,
Exclusion.
exclusion, yeah. To keep yourself pure, to develop holiness, okay? Keep yourself uncontaminated. That is one stream, long-standing, and in the Adventist church also. The other stream has been, no, the path of Jesus was the path of engagement with the world.
Even immersion. Yeah.
Even immersion in the world. John the Baptist went out into the wilderness, the people came to him. But Jesus went where the people were. He went to the people. So who do we follow, John the Baptist or Jesus? A lot of Adventists have said, no, John the Baptist is the model. I say Jesus is the model.
Well, you have Paul in 1 Corinthians 6 in relationship to an unbelieving spouse.
Yes.
In the Old Testament, the unholy defiles.
Defiles. Yeah.
But for Paul, the holy sanctifies.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah,
Very good.
that's very interesting
good.
and very unusual in the general pattern of world religions.
Yes.
To have that defilement model inverted that way.
Right.
Yeah. Bev, there's more here, isn't there? What do
Yeah.
you think?
Oh, this is such a challenge for us to look at our lives today.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not as obvious, right? It's not as obvious. There's not, especially living in America, we're such a diverse culture. We often feel like we're very inclusive. It feels like we share all of the things. But this is a really big challenge to, are you going to follow? Are the things that matter to Jesus going to matter to you? And if the answer is yes, it's going to get really uncomfortable because you're going to have to walk in the places that you're not used to walking.
Yeah.
And I think for us today, if we can take a moment to really sift through what we think we know. Is that what you used to tell us in class, Dr. Taylor? You think you know, but be wise and be better at knowing what you don't know. And that might mean that maybe we're not as inclusive as we think. Maybe this is a moment for us to meditate on, if we're thinking about this city that we're so longing for, this otherness, we're going to have to chase the peace that Jesus is chasing and leading us to. And some of us will have to be really honest. We might not want to cross that gate. We're not ready. We're not ready to leave that holiness that we have perceived to be only in one space. And it might be taking us kicking and screaming to follow Jesus to places it's going to look really different today. You know, we don't have the same customs. You know, this isn't quite the same for us, and yet I'm hearing it really loudly now going, where is it going to call us to, where is Jesus calling us to follow him today?
And bear the abuse he endured.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah.
It's a startling message for all Christians,
Yeah.
but I think
Indeed.
especially for Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah.
Because we have our subculture, okay? We like to have our Sabbath dinners where we all eat the same things. We have the people, we know everyone, we're related to people. This is a call to break away from that, your comfort zone.
Right.
Break away. Outside the camp is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. But Jesus went there first.
Right.
And as his followers, we're called to follow,
Yeah.
to walk where he walked. Yeah.
I also think it's quite beautiful because then we can go back to that first part, verse 6, and, you know, there's this promise, you don't have to be afraid.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
going to get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And again, this isn't a promise that things are going to be easy, and they're not going to be scary. But I think, you know, saying don't be afraid is an indicator you're going to get scared,
Yeah.
and it's going to get uncomfortable, and it's going to be difficult. And yet we have this beautiful promise, but Jesus is your helper.
So here then, in verse 6, you're exactly right. This is the source of our audacity, our courage.
Yeah.
Can I say our gutsiness as
Yeah.
Christians? Yeah, isn't that right? Because he's been there ahead of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is a sacrifice. Bill, I think you're right when you say uncomfortable. It's a sacrifice to go there. But it's a sacrifice that in a small way mimics the great ultimate sacrifice that Christ himself provides. We then simply confess his name and do good and share. That's what's pleasing to God.
You know, if you just take the Gospels and really think about them, Jesus was a radical. Look at the people he associated with, the people he ate with.
Right.
His enemies said, you know, he's a friend of tax collectors and sinners. They hurled that at him. What a compliment. He was their friend, you know. And look, he has a radical, a revolutionary as one of the 12. Okay? He associates with all sorts of people, you know, down and out people, outside the camp. He went outside the camp.
There is a pilgrimage here. Today, we still see pilgrims, various religions, and they are typically pilgrims to centers, to Jerusalem, to Rome, wherever. But this is a pilgrimage away from center, isn't it?
Yeah.
Away from all that's defined as sacred and holy and good and powerful and meaningful and miraculous. No. We find all of the miracle and the power and the cleansing and the reassurance precisely away from the center. We are called beyond the center into a larger, dirtier, messier world. We'll talk about it some more next time. Searching for Answers.